Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another Trek the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on volume 18, chapter 0 something. There's no chapter when it opens up. We'll get into that when we get into it. What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey, chat. Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you guys so much for your support. Everybody that dropped by for the premiere, everybody that checks out the video afterwards, your guys' monetary support, everybody that supports through super chats, memberships, Patreon, gifted memberships, all that stuff. It's greatly appreciated. Last week we had a ton of stuff. Let's go through. Philip, Noah, Kusha, Alvaro, Abraham, Mud Pie, David, Adrian, Gearless with 20 gifted memberships, Sabanasu. Thank you guys so much for that. It means the world to me. But yes, additionally, I had a couple things that kind of came to mind as we were going through last week's Mushoku Monday that I want to get into before we get things started. But yes, I didn't tier list 17. Now, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be a questionable one for me choosing this one, because I kind of thought about it for a while, and it's one of those things, like I always like to say, when I tier list the Mushoku Tensei series, it's against each other. It's not as like a novel as a whole. So I want to put 17 in C. It's not my favorite volume overall. There's a lot of really good points throughout it, but it's one of those novels that afterwards, when I look back at it, I'm like, that wasn't that great. And I want to get into a reason why here in a minute, but it wasn't that spectacular. But it's not of the C grade. It's one of those issues where, like, it doesn't fit in with the other C's, but it doesn't fit in with the other B's. So I think I'm going to put it like low B, because I want to give it more credit than saying that it's on par with the C's. So at this point, I think I'm going to go low B. And again, I don't know if that's controversial. There is some really cool moments throughout that particular novel. But again, when I step back, I look at what it did and I compare it to the rest of the novels. That's the key thing. When I compare it to the other volumes, that's where I have my issues. So I think low B is good. I might change that later on when I finally do my end of the series tier list, which I'll probably move things around like crazy when that time comes around. But for now, I think that's where it sits in my current tier list. So that aside, what I was getting to earlier, I think, I don't know, there could still be something coming up, and I kind of accept that. I think towards the later part of the last volume of 17, I got crazy into this theory that there was that turning point wasn't over yet. That at some point we're going to find out that yes, the man god is still going after the throne, and that something comes up. But it seems like things are changing. Like, this is kind of a spoiler to this Mushoku Monday, which most people that are watching this have already read it. Spoiler to this Mushoku Monday. It gets into talking about how time is passing, and a lot of conflict with disciples is happening. So obviously, either one, Orsted was wrong, that he can, in fact, change his disciples on a regular basis. Because if you go back to when they had that one discussion in volume 17, Orsted pointed out the idea of the turning points for the man god, or these points in which he's going towards. He equated it to this idea that once he's selected his 3, it doesn't change. He doesn't really change until it gets to that end point. And when Rudius says, so he's set to what he's at right now until that point is reached. Exactly. Orsted responds, exactly. Like, exactly, that's how it is. So it can't change. And it was one of those things where as I'm going towards the end of 17, I'm starting to doubt myself in my idea of that, yes, Luke, Darius, and Rada were the 3 disciples, and those cannot change, so thus the turning point has to happen. But now I'm starting to believe that might not be true. That either that was a turning point, it didn't happen, man god failed, or it's going on longer and he's able to change his disciples on a regular basis. So that aside, I think I'm going to finally, with these first 2 chapters, again, technically not a chapter in the first chapter, and I got a little bit in the second chapter. We'll see how much we get in this one. So far, it seems like we're not going to get through much. At this point, I'm shelving that. The whole idea of Ariel, I think that she's still going to die. I just have that feeling. I think there's something going to happen in Asura. I'm going to shelve that for now as it being this turning point is really my prediction there. I'm going to keep that prediction that I think she's not going to make it. I think they're flagging something there. But and additionally, I think that it's just too powerful. Putting aside the man god and everything, Asura is a powerful kingdom that so many, I would assume, based on what we've talked about so far, I would assume that a lot of countries want to take him down. I would assume Millis wants to take him down. I would assume the Dragon King realm wants to take him down. I would assume that even Renoa wants to take him down. So it's not so much as a thing of a product of the man god. It's just a product of that's a powerful kingdom that many want to take down. That aside, I have to say a big bad chat, a bad chat moment here. I think now we can finally put a close to a lot of the things around Asura at this point. I think I can finally put that to close. And with that, I don't know who it was. I forget who it was. I think it was like 4 people. Back when I was critiquing Sylphie for getting Rudeus involved with the conflict with Asura, I said that she's bringing him into a battle. And I kept having people going, what makes you think it's going to be a battle? And it's like, it's one of those ones where it's like, you guys do realize you're making it, you're breaking my predictions there by saying it. The assumption is that it would be a battle. I think they even mentioned the idea of conflict and getting allies and everything. Yes, do I think it was going to be a full-scale war where you have like the entire Renoa coming down with troops into Asura? Could have. That's typically how a lot of these things can sometimes go. But it's kind of one of those bad chat moments where it's like, I don't know why people will critique my way of thinking when I'm going into this thought process by essentially declining my train of thought with, well, what makes you think that? Because I haven't read ahead like you did. That's that problem that kind of comes up. So it's another one of those kind of reminders to people to kind of chill on your responses to, you know, my thought process and where it's going. Just let it flow. Let me cook, as people say. But anyways, I've been waiting for a while to get that off my chest because it's been in the back of my head for a long time. That comment, what makes you think it's going to be a battle? So it's just going to be somebody going in there and poking somebody, which is literally what happened. Thanks for spoiling it. It did sort of remain there, and my entire process, I'm like, yeah, what if it's not going to turn out to be a war? I guess it's not going to be a war. I guess Renoa's not going to support her and go down there. I guess they could have just a group of people like what happened. Anyways, that aside, I don't really care. In the end, I don't really care. I just like to point out things like that. The last thing that I wanted to mention about 17, as I was kind of closing it out, there is one fear that I have that I didn't express, and I can probably throw it here, is I do want to admit that I do have a fear that this will be the status quo. With this whole idea, as we were getting into towards the later part, and Reese is talking about this is one battle of many. I'm going to be doing this for a while now. And it starts to get into that with these first 2 chapters, first 2 segments. Is this idea that it's going to be Orsted tells Rudeus, go do this. He goes, does that, tells Orsted. Orsted tells him to go do this. He goes, do that. I hope that, and I'm gonna assume that this is, because Refugian's good at kind of shifting things. Yes, that phrase that I've said like 5 times at this point in this video. He does have a habit of kind of throwing in these things that completely twist the script. And it turns and pivots the story in a different direction. So I don't actually hold to that fear. It's just a fear in the back of my head. I hope that this doesn't become like a constant, where it's constantly Orsted tells Rudeus, there's these disciples, go do this thing because it's crucial for the future. Okay, he did it. Now go back to Orsted. Orsted says, go do this thing. He goes and does it, comes back to Orsted. Okay, they've done it. And I don't want that to be literally the next 5 volumes is all these different turning points that Orsted is telling Rudeus to fix, that the man god's going to do. But again, he's good at twisting the narrative and shifting things around, so we'll see. But I did want to express that is kind of a fear that's in the back of my head. So yeah, I think I got everything. So let's get into volume 18 proper and dive into chapter 0, Dearest Paul. Now, I did not edit this up much because as I was going through this and breaking it down, I assumed that this was going to be pretty emotional, so I kind of kept it pretty much to the wording of the novel, so it is what it is. I didn't want to have to go back through it and edit again. So, Dearest Paul, time marches forward all too quickly. It has been half a year since those chaotic events of Asura Kingdom transpired. I'm 20 now. We finally date Rudeus again. I think the last time we dated him was he was 18. So it's been a while. Time has passed. We're in the 20s now. He's anime old now, which means my little sisters will soon be 14. I've continued to train myself while attending to any work Orsted gives me. Orsted knows nearly everything there is to know, yet he's not the best instructor. I guess he doesn't have a knack for teaching others. On top of that, he refuses to use his mana, so he can't demonstrate anything for me either. He'll teach me incantation and some tricks for using the spell that he's sharing with me, but and perhaps this is because he's a genius, so everything comes to him naturally, most of it doesn't make any sense to me at all. I'm sure part of the problem is that I'm not a very good student. You can't show me one small part of an equation and expect me to come up with the rest on my own. I'm not that brilliant. My memories from my previous life do help me figure things out quickly, but they're pretty much useless when it comes to learning Saint tier or King tier spells. Except for Saint tier water magic, because that was all about him utilizing his knowledge in the clouds and how temperature shifting works and everything like that. So I don't think he's really kind of equating that. But yes, learning other ones is the major problem there, because he kind of acknowledged that with the whole situation with healing magic. It's like, okay, if this helped me figure out this magic, maybe it's because I just don't know how the body works and how you can mend wounds and whatnot, how the body's structure and how the tissue comes back together, all that kind of stuff. It was almost making it into like this idea of him having to envision it in some way, putting together the formula of how physics and everything works. Now, my original thought was that Orsted would like see things and he would learn it as he watched it kind of be performed, which could actually give him the ability to teach to others. But if it is one of those things where he just sees it and he naturally picks it up really quickly, yeah, he's going to be kind of like Paul teaching Rudius, and this idea that he just doesn't know. It came naturally to him, so he can't teach it to Rudius. For instance, let's take a look at Flashover, a Saint tier fire spell that ignites a vast area in an instant. I thought it was like the spell Sizzle in Dragon Quest, using light to produce heat. Alas, my intuition was off the mark, although it cobbled together something similar enough. Orsted responded to my attempts by cocking his head in puzzlement. Spells aren't the only thing Orsted taught me. He also shared me knowledge, especially that pertaining to fighting against other mages, or swordsmen from various schools of swordsmanship. Yeah, that's one of those odd things, like he's showing him this flashover, and then Rudius, again, sort of is envisioning it and doing something of a similar aspect by applying his past knowledge. Again, this is where it's kind of showing that he is unique in the idea that he almost just makes it come to life by what he's picturing, what he's envisioning. And that should technically break common sense in this world, like common knowledge and how things work. Now that I think about it, he basically taught me combat strategies. Given my high offensive power, the plethora of spells at my disposal, and the Eye of Foresight, Orsted says my best bet is throwing off the enemy's balance and cornering them, cutting off their options before landing my final blow. That's basically how I've been fighting so far, but I think being self-aware makes the biggest difference. Yeah, that's technically how his work. He sees that Eye of Foresight. It's showing the person going this direction or whatever. He can cut him off. He was doing that against Orsted. That was literally what he was doing with Orsted. I've been employing this strategy during practice battles with Edis. And on the occasion, I teach Sylphie, Norn, and Aisha, just to ensure it's completely ingrained. Thanks to those efforts, my magic has improved immensely. My wind and fire magic are now Saint tier. As is my healing and detoxification magic. Thank you. Thank you. While my divine magic is intermediate tier. That's a pretty big jump in only a year. That is a massive jump. Again, he's already Saint tier in earth magic. So this pretty much brings fire and wind in par with that. And then, yeah, of course, the water magic, he's King tier. Now, yes, I would technically want to have healing and detoxification probably higher than that. I know that when he was first looking into healing and detoxification, he was like, this pretty much covers everything. And that's one of those things where, like, I think back then, again, like I mentioned at the end of the last volume, I think back then it made sense. Like, this is just something that nobody ever uses. Why would I put so much effort into this? And again, I think now that he is at the point he's at where he's like, I'm going to be fighting over and over and over and over and over again. This is a big, long-going 100-year war that I'm going to be going into. I use the word war. I'm sorry. Skirmishes. He now needs it. He needs it. And he's already seen in his first battle, technical battle, working with Orsted, in his first battle, he has run into situations of needing both. He's lost a limb. He needs some really good healing magic. He's had, Edis being poisoned. He needs detoxification. And so it's nice that he's finally brought everything up to Saint tier. And yes, water magic higher than that. And it's odd that divine magic is where he's struggling with. Because again, from volume 1, his biggest issue has always been healing. That was the one thing it was more in the idea that he couldn't do incantationless. But he wasn't able to use his knowledge to help him improve it. Though, at this point, again, we've technically established that a lot of his mindset around how magic worked and how he was able to improve it has sort of been proven wrong. And a lot of that was Sylphie. Sylphie was just kind of leaving him in the dust. It didn't make any sense because he had that knowledge. Now, he was bestowing that knowledge upon her. He was teaching her how, evaporation and stuff works, but still. But yeah, divine magic, that's an oddity. Now, He just recently, if I remember correctly, when he got to the university, that was when he finally started getting into divine magic, and he wasn't even focusing on it. So it makes sense that within this little time span, he's not going to get very far with divine magic. He's done and worked with a lot of other magics and other schools. So it makes sense that's the one that's kind of being left behind a bit there. But it's cool that he's actually still at least putting some effort into it. And that might open the door to barriers. Because if I remember correctly, barriers were divine magic. So maybe whenever he goes down to, which he does technically bring up in these chapters, if he ever does go down and help out Cliff, maybe he can pick up some barrier magic from there. That's a pretty big jump in only a year. That said, I still can't draw magic circles. And I haven't really touched summoning magic. There's a lot on my to-do list. I may already know a lot of magic, but I can't rest on my laurels. I've got to keep working at it. At least I've grown a little stronger for now. Yes. Thank you. Good job, Rudius. Big W, Rudius. I had some fears in that discussion at the graveyard in the last part of 17, but it looks like he followed through. He actually followed through. He did good. My work with Orsha was going well. Perhaps thanks to my training, but I haven't really done anything big since that matter in Ostra Kingdom. It's small stuff like go to the labyrinth and help this adventurer lost inside it, and go save this merchant who's about to be eaten alive by monsters, and go visit this company and purchase a boy who's become a slave, then sell them off here. Oh my gosh, that's gonna be controversy, dang it. Rudius is paying into it. There's the next controversy whenever this comes up in, what would that be? Season 4? Even season 4 or something like that? It does suck, but okay, this is a good discussion. This is actually a good discussion. Yes, it sucks. I don't like it. If I could, snap my fingers and make this kind of thing go away, this forced servitude stuff go away, I would do it. If I was Rudius in that world and I could snap my finger and suddenly it all goes away, how many times do you want me to snap it? I would love that. But it is a thing that exists in this world. But I do find it very interesting in the regard to the idea that even if Rudius was extremely against this, would he be able to stop it? Because what is being presented here is Orsid telling Rudius, take this person, buy them from here, and sell them here. Now, why is he saying that? It's not because he wants to help that person from this location. It is technically in the end. It's because this person is probably going to do something over here. Or because this person buys him, he doesn't buy this other person. Say the trader themselves, by purchasing this person from Rudius, they can't afford to buy this person, and thus that person goes to this other kingdom, where then they're sold over there, where they're important over there. It's one of those aspects that you can't really think about it. You just do what he says because you're putting the pieces into play. So even if he does have an aversion to this, he can't do anything about it because it's necessary for this future that Ors is putting together, just the same as getting Ariel on that throne. It's an interesting conundrum that kind of brings that up. They're mostly menial tasks consisting of helping people out, but I put all my effort into them. These will apparently be of use to Orsid in the future. For example, take the Dwarven Thief I saved the other day named Tao Shi. She's not personally useful herself, but her son will be a future leader of the Assassin's Guild. It's very interesting. It's the butterfly effect. He'll eventually assassinate someone that would otherwise be a thorn in Orsid's side. Of course, it would be no trouble for Orsid to kill this person directly if they got in the way, but by orchestrating things in advance, he saves himself precious time and mana. That's the cool thing here, because it is probably one of those things where Orsid's like, normally he'd probably just wait for the person to come after him and kill him themselves, but because he has Rudius now here, he can send Rudius to do it. That's the benefit that Rudius gives him, is these menial tasks, these small little tasks that will all help him in the future, that yes, probably he did himself because he was traveling all over the place. When he was with Nanahoshi, he was probably doing it then. He's traveling all over the place and going, okay, I need to pick up this rock and put it right here. And then that horse is going to run over it. The carriage breaks. They take it to this place. That guy at that place fixes it. Thus, he doesn't go bankrupt. Thus, he builds up his merchant group that he's doing, his carpenter guild or something like that. And thus, he makes lots of money. And thus, he will fund this person. It's like that whole butterfly effect thing. I do like time things and butterfly effects sometimes. I do get a kick out of it. The butterfly effect is technically very, very interesting. Simply put, changing the past means less trouble in the future. In all of this, the key to victory rests in Orsid's condition when he finally confronts the man god. Yes, keeping him topped off basically, and never kind of worn out or whatever. Having lived through numerous loops, Orsid already knows what certain people can accomplish. if saved from otherwise untimely demise. Ensuring those who will do things in his favor will allow him to operate efficiently in the coming generations. In game terms, it's basically controlling variables and fulfilling prerequisites. But in all this case, it involves making the right acquaintances. Anyways, Orsted generally doesn't help out with what I do. He's working on other stuff elsewhere, setting up things that only he can set up. The man god hasn't interfered much. Or, I should say, he hasn't at all during my solo work. He has been trying to get in the way of what Orsted is doing, which must mean that's far more of a threat to him. In fact, during the times that I worked together with Orsted, 1 or 2 of the man god's apostles have made an appearance in the process. The weird thing is, they've never come in threes. So, perhaps he's got a third person doing something else in the background. Ding, ding, ding. Here was the death knell to my my theories around this whole restricted apostles and the TP thing and Ariel specifically. This right here is telling me that he's constantly cycling these people, or technically he's running into multiple of these points. And I think what that kind of incentivizes here, especially him saying there's one person that never shows up, that's Geese. Geese is the one that is probably kind of heading it, not heading it, but he's the central focus for the man god. He's the unchanging thing. So what he's doing is he's basically bringing this group together. A group, and there's these 2 apostles at any other time other than Geese that are kind of working together, and they're sending them off to attack Orsted as he's doing each of these different points. But the thing that's unchanging is Geese. He's leaving Geese as being the central point, because again, I think he's using Geese to figure it out. Figure out how I can break this cycle of the Dragon God winning against me in all these scenarios. And so that's why whenever it comes to somebody attacking Orsted or getting in Orsted's way, it ends up being only 2 people, because Geese is never going to go. Geese is not a fighter. So it makes sense that he's never going to go at him directly. So again, that also technically, again, either means that we're going through a ton of turning points right now, or that he's swapping people out towards this final goal. And that was very curious to find out people saying that according to a few people, that was apparently the question mark chapter was not in the web novel. So it's like, okay, that tells me he wanted to kind of hint at something else earlier than usual. Whatever they're hinting at in that chapter was something that he wanted to kind of seed earlier than he did, actually the reveal. That makes me nervous, given we have no way to make sure. I have to wonder if we're doing enough. Should we not be finding a way to attack the man god directly? I'm actually very surprised that Rudius is not more keen on that. Like, I really don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Can we figure out a way of just going there now? And I know what Orsted would say. It was like, no, we need to put all this stuff into play because I have to get to this point because I figured out last time this is what I need, and I have it now. I'm not going to change that. When I asked Orsted about it, he simply shook his head.
According to your diary, the future he was really trying to change hasn't come to pass.
I guess that means we've got to keep up with our preparations until then. That's very interesting. It's a very interesting thing that I didn't really think about when I was actually reading through this segment. According to your diary, the future he was really trying to change hasn't come to pass. That makes me think that this is where it goes back to my previous theory. This makes me think that when Orsted, this is a possibility, when Orsted read that in diary and seen what the man god was doing to future Rudius, maybe it was more so the fact that he wasn't seeing what the man god was doing against Rudius, but he was seeing what future Rudius had said that indicated what the man god was actually doing. Yes, from the future diary's perspective, it's yes, the man god destroyed Rudius. But additionally, most of it was, yes, Rudius trying to get back at the man god. But sprinkled throughout there may have been bits and pieces that gave him an indication that, oh, he wants to destroy Asura. Oh, he wants to do this. He's taking what he sees based on his past experiences, the past loops. He's taking what that layout was of his past loop and comparing it to what future Rudius had mentioned. If at any point in that diary it says, and then I went to, Billy Bob's clubhouse over here in the Demon Continent, and it was destroyed, he goes, no, Billy Bob's clubhouse was there. So maybe the man god wanted that destroyed. So I got to fix that. And I got to put everything back into play. Everything that he's going to destroy, I have to put back into play because, again, he figured out how he can beat him last time, and he needs to make sure that everything kind of goes equally as it did before. plus whatever he figured out. So that's actually interesting. So it kind of makes me want to go back and read that. But I know it's going to be one of those cases where when I go back and read it, it's probably something that was not explicitly said when he was reading it. So it's probably going to be something that they might actually reveal later on. But I might take a look at it. Guess that means we got to keep up with our preparations until then. As for the future the man god was trying to change, I suspect our next big showdown will involve Cliff. There it is. He's already jumping right into it. According to my future diary, I let him die. Yeah, but you're not going there to get that scroll. So it's odd that he's bringing it up here. It almost feels like Refugin is accidentally tilting his hand. Because it's like, why would Rudius think that? Because Cliff died while he was trying to help him get that information. And they're not going to do that this time. Now, it could be Rudius basically going, maybe Cliff dying was the man god's doing, and thus, not even though we're not going there still to get this cure for Roxy, he could still try to do it. So I gotta watch out for Cliff. I suspect the man god was involved with that, though I have no way of confirming that. It doesn't help that Orsted won't share most of the essential details with me. I guess the question mark is, has Orsted ever actually mentioned it? He's suspecting it, but he's not saying that Orsted is saying that. But again, if Orsted is talking about this whole thing about, you know, what he's really trying to change hasn't come to pass yet, could be Rudius sort of connecting the two of them. At any rate, that's how it's been going. I work for a month, go into the office to make my report, then spend 2 or 3 days with the family and friends. I have about 5 to 10 days of rest, which I spend training before the next job comes in. That's pretty much how my life has been for a while now. Oh, speaking of work, I finally carried out some of my plans I've made. The first of them pertains to my workspace. We've been using the little cottage on the outskirts of Shiraya where we first built my magic armor, but it wouldn't meet the long-term needs of our headquarters. So I had it remodeled. It's still a 1-story house, but there's now a nap room, a meeting room, and a reference room. This allows for overnights, if needed, and makes it easier for us to have strategy meetings. Of course, it makes me a little anxious leaving my records of our meetings and plans there. But on the other hand, there's way too much information for me to remember it all. Such as when so-and-so from such and such place will do a such and such thing, and who, if allowed to live, will have such and such impact on the future. I also made an armory not far from the cottage itself, where I store any magic items or implements, as well as my magic armor. Speaking of which, we managed to make a smaller version of my magic armor, but I'll spare you the details. Yeah, we'll show it later on. Just don't talk about it. I just made it smaller. You don't care. He's literally writing a letter in a diary that he will never send. Yeah, I'll spare the details. But again, it's good that he writes down this stuff. This is all good stuff that he's writing down because, yes, he could have to pass it on to somebody else, or he might have to go back in the past. Who knows? But again, for me, it's a lot to do with the idea that that's just how I remember things. I write them down. With the amount of stuff I got stowed there, a thief would be set for life if he stole it all and sold it. Since I'm the only one that used the inventory, I've sealed the door with earth magic to guard against chances someone might swipe it all. He should actually ask Orsted about how to do that whole illusion effect and hide it. That would actually be very curious. If Orsted can make it. I would assume because, again, he knows all abilities, but it could be not an ability. It could just be a circle, and he might not know. He should know the circle. Orsted might not have any use for the stuff in there, but since it's still technically office supplies, I've got to make sure it's taken care of. I've actually worked for a couple jobs where it's like you have to go and get the key, and you go in the closet, and you have to sign down what you get, even if you get like a pencil. It's so dumb. Makes me wish I had someone to look after it all. That said, these aren't the only changes I made. Our central work office is actually in the basement of the cottage. Using earth magic, I've created a huge space, almost like a labyrinth. The place is split into 23 rooms. Each one will take you to a major location across the world. Eventually, anyways. Only 5 of the circles have been properly activated, meaning the only places we can travel to are Osra Kingdom, Holy Country of Millis, Great Forest, the King Dragon Realm, and the southern part of the Demon Continent. That's interesting because, again, what I was mentioning earlier was that, yes, technically he could have Orsted just create a whole bunch of circles for him, but it still has that issue with the ley lines. Now, yes, there is another way of doing it, which is to use recharged gems or whatever placed in a certain place to charge it up. But yeah, would you want to go through that? I guess it depends on how much it takes. I mean, technically, I would assume that Orsted probably has plenty of those gems. I mean, he's the type that like, hey, how much do you need? Bam! And he throws like this big bag full of like extremely expensive gems and stuff like that. He could have a supply of it. And yes, technically being able to travel around, if Rudius figures out some way of making money, he could technically fund it. I mean, we find out here in a minute that he's technically selling the, he didn't sell the figurine, he gave it to somebody. He could be selling them at the same time, but yeah, he would need a way back. He has technically the whole lamplight spirits that he's also selling, so he's got ways of making money right now. So I don't know, we'll see. Just go take out a couple labyrinths. just willy-nilly would take out some labyrinths. Shoot, take down some Red Worm stragglers at this point, since he took them out when he was weaker. He could take them out now for sure. But it was interesting that I didn't actually mention, did he build it on a ley line, or is he having to charge them? We only have 5, because we have to set up connecting teleportation circles on the other side. And unfortunately, Orsted doesn't really visit those sort of deserted locations that would be ideal for our purposes. Crowded places make it a bit difficult to set up teleportation circles. Hence the reason why we don't have more than 5, though we do plan to expand in the future. Yeah, he's literally making that whole area like a just a central hub. Now, yes, technically, they sort of imply that the northern regions of that area is rich with magic. So it could be that there's tons of ley lines, so it doesn't really matter. All right, Paul. I'm sure work talk got y'all bored to tears, and we probably don't want to hear any more of it. Let's get back to what you actually been waiting for, and talk about your kids and grandkids. We'll start off with my oldest daughter, Lucy Greyrat. Lucy is growing steadily. She just celebrated her 3rd birthday the other day. She got better at walking and todders about the house. She learned quite a bit of vocabulary and likes to speak in a loud voice. Thanks in part, I bet, to Edis. So our house is quite lively. Yeah, she keeps hearing Edis yelling all the time. She's like, oh, that sounds cool. It seems that Sylphie has been teaching her the human tongue and magic lately. Only 3, and she's already receiving some kind of special education, usually reserved to gifted children. I guess Sylphie will be a teacher mom. If she puts on some regular triangle glasses, my little lessons with her at night might heat up too. Anyways, back to Lucy. I guess I haven't spent much time with her. So sometimes when I come home, she stares at me blankly like she has no idea who I am. It's super disheartening. Thankfully, Sylphie always says, "That's Daddy, say hi." And she'll respond, "Welcome home, Daddy." She is so ridiculously adorable, I could just eat her up. But immediately after she greeted me, she gets this look like she doesn't know who Daddy is, then hides behind Sylphie. Oof. Oof. It's heartbreaking. She'll never respect me as a father at this rate. I know this is the path I chose, but that doesn't make it any less depressing. And again, that goes back to that whole idea of like, gosh, I would be pushing Orsted, like, can we figure out a way of just ending this now? That sucks. But while we're on the topic of Lucy, I did take her to meet Orsted once. I was curious if his curse would work on her, whether what the man god said was true or not. In short, his curse doesn't work on her. In fact, the moment she saw him, her eyes lit up. She stretched out her tiny hands towards his silver hair and shouted, "Daddy, Daddy," as if she legitimately thought he was her real father. I honestly considered killing Orsted at that point. Just kidding. Sorry. I swear I didn't feel that murderously towards him. That sucks. Yes, I can't even imagine that. The comical side of this aside, can't even imagine that. That would, again, technically he's never able to be at home. He's home rarely. And then when he's actually at home, she doesn't even know who he is. And she's hiding from him. Like, she's literally hiding behind Sylphie at points. That's gotta hurt. Like, this is my daughter, and she doesn't even recognize me. Doesn't see me as that. And then, yes, technically her going after Orsted and saying, "That's Daddy," because the hair's similar. So it makes sense, technically. She's very color coordinated. But no, this is obviously very, very interesting, because there was a side of me that was almost going to think that Sylphie's bloodline wasn't going to be at all a part of this thing with Orsted. And I think the reason I came to that conclusion was it seemed like the man god didn't care that Rudeus had a child with Sylphie. Again, when did the man god take action? It was when Roxy got pregnant. That was the one that she was after. And again, I think it adds to it in the idea that Sacred Beast is so attached to Roxy and now, Laura. So, which, by the way, thanks for people spoiling that one. It's like everybody's yelling, "That's Laura!" And I'm like, yeah, thank you for spoiling. It's going to be a girl. Not that it's a big deal. But no, my thought process there was that strictly the bloodlines were going to be through Roxy, whatnot. Not specifically Sylphie. That Sylphie wasn't going to be a part of this farther down battle with Orsted against the man god. That the disciples through Roxy and maybe even Edis were going to be that bloodline. It was still up in the air if it was going to be Edis too or not. So now getting a confirmation that, yes, it seems like, at least for this case, and it seems to be implying it for a lot of later on, it does seem like both of his children so far have been blessed with the ability to not be affected by Orsted's curse. He's 2 for 2 right now for his children to essentially inherit his ability to offset that curse. Now, we could find out later on that maybe it's just partially getting against it or whatever, but that is very, very interesting, which is kind of curious to everything with Petagoose, which technically with Petagoose, it was because he's looking into Laplace. And again, I think that's an aspect of him birthing somebody, or birthing a boy specifically.
and that Petagoose is going to want to meet them. Which makes me think that if Edis ends up being the one to actually birth a boy, I'm still curious how that's going to go. Because again, he said, bring a boy to me. And that was first meet. And my prediction there was that don't do that, because he might want to kill them, because it might be the one that's going to be the one that will carry Laplace. So again, I think they specified that it has to be a boy, because he was talking about how is Sylphie a reincarnation of Laplace? No, it has to be a boy. So that was why Petagoose was so dead set on a boy. So I'll be curious. Edda's not going to be too happy about that if that's what Petagoose wants to do. Edda's going to have some choice words. That's an interesting future, possibly. But yeah, I'd have to admit that I would not physically write down, I honestly considered killing Orsted. Don't. Don't write that. Scratch that out. Erase it, because if Orsted finds out you wrote that, he'd probably be like, you are working for the man god. But it kind of annoyed me, that's all. Maybe it's because Sylphie has white hair. So Lucy assumed Orsted must be family, since his hair was similar color. I taught her his name, which she promptly repeated as Orste? Orste. How sweet. Perfectly native pronunciation, if I do say so myself. As I watched sourly, Orsted let Lucy ride on his shoulders. She was gripping his hair tight enough that it worried me that she might rip it out. So I scolded her. It's not good to pull on someone's hair. Amusingly, or perhaps interestingly enough, Orsted replied,
It's not an issue. Something this trivial won't begin to affect my Dragon Saint battle aura.
He seemed rather happy that Lucy took such a liking to him. And how could he not be? She's insanely cute. That is very, very interesting. Again, it is one of those things where it's easy to see Orsted as being sort of this emotionalist thing. But again, I think it's because it's so locked behind the curse that you don't see that Orsted's kind of a normal person. Now, yes, you can also assume, based on the fact that he's been looping over and over again for thousands of years, that he's lost emotion. Again, he's lost hesitation. Like with the whole situation when he first met Rudius. No hesitation. Do you know who the man god is? Yeah, he comes to me and must kill. Like, no hesitation. This is a kid. There's a kid in front of him. No hesitation. Take him out. Because he's lived so long, he probably no longer hesitates. He knows that hesitating means death. He knows hesitating means losing this battle. And yes, he's gone through, all those hundreds of loops before then, where anybody that was an apostle of the man god was coming to kill him, or causing him to lose, causing him to fail. So he has to get rid of them. So yeah, it is kind of interesting to kind of see this other side that is technically like a normal person. When you have some cute kid is yanking at your head and having fun, it fills you with joy. So yeah, Orsted is a normal person behind that curse. Or maybe we'll find out that Orsted maybe had a kid in one of those loops. Who knows? That'd be tragic. Don't get into that. Don't get into the idea that Orsted has had a child in one of the loops and lost it or something. Or maybe got to the end of the loop and had to say goodbye. Oof. Anyways, what the man god said seemed to be more believable now. The part about my descendants working with Orsted to defeat him. When I brought that up to Orsted, he glared at me with a terrifying expression and said,
Don't trust what the man god says.
Of course, I don't trust everything he says, but I also got a sense there's some truth in there. Maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part. Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense because you have the ability to divert that curse and get around it, and that's literally Orsted's biggest issue. He can't have allies when the allies constantly don't trust him and hate him. Like, if you had Orsted meet, say, Sylphie, and he goes up to Sylphie and he says, Join me, I gotta fight the man god. She's gonna literally go, hell no, and run away. Like, there would be no way for him to just recruit her. It has to be somebody that can get past that. Or Ariel. Lately, I've gotten better at reading Orsted's moods. He's in a super good mood when he plays around with Lucy. He apparently finds anyone who becomes attached to him endearing. On top of that, I'm sure he's happy to encounter new things. After going through the same time loop over and over, I can only imagine what he must be feeling after the number of loops that he's been going through. As his subordinate, I want to help him ensure that he finds each day as entertaining as the last. Rudius, you're such a good boy. There was a side of me when I got here, I almost thought he was going to start getting into his past self. Like, I used to be like that when I was stuck in my room. Everything was the same. And every now and then something new would come. Yeah, maybe it was a video game or something like that. Then suddenly my life was filled with something new and unique. I mean, I've had times where I've gotten kind of stuck in like this rut where all I want to do is just lock up my room and play games. Just do something. I don't want to go outside or anything. and you get kind of in that loop, and then whenever something new kind of comes in to kind of change a little bit, in most cases you don't want it there, but every now and then when it's something that you want, like a game, say, so to speak, suddenly it's like, yes, I got this new game comes out, and suddenly I have something new to look forward to, and I'm playing that, and I'm excited and discovering something new. But yeah, I was almost thinking he's going to do that here. Like, yeah, equate it to his own self, because it's a super wholesome thought process here that I want to make sure that my boss, finds something new every day. I need to bring Lara over here because, he's going to probably love her too. They're going to have so much fun together. Is that idea of almost wanting to share your own joy too. I have Lucy and she's my joy and I want to share that with somebody else. But yeah, I've always kind of wondered that with how Orsted brought Nanahoshi under his wing. Why? Why did Orsted ever care about Nanahoshi? Why did he ever decide to help Nanahoshi? Again, always getting this perspective of Orsted being like this emotionless person that just wants everything to burn. He's always angry looking at everything. Why help Nanahoshi? He found her in the midst of this deserted area and swooped her up and carried her everywhere and helped her. Again, carried her through Begarit. She was like nearly passing out and dying. He was carrying her through there. Why? Why would he care? His goal is a man god. Why would he help Nanahoshi, who's got no magic and is weak and frail and can't really defend herself? Can't even speak their language, ? That's curious. Maybe it was because he's seen something and it was different. And so he decided to help her. That's the only thing I can think about it. Is this something new? It's kind of interesting to me. Let me help it out. See what it does. Because it wasn't like he was helping her to figure out things. He wasn't helping her because he wanted to figure out what happened in the displacement incident. He just helped her. Again, why? It doesn't benefit his goal. It actually is an anomaly that could be created by the man god. You would think that he'd want to get rid of it. So I was always curious. This might answer it. And it may actually bring it up later on. I'm surprised Reese at this point hasn't even brought it up. Like, why did you help Nanahoshi, by the way? It's curious. Whoops, got off track again. Well, while we're on the topic of children, Roxy gave birth. There was a blizzard that day. The renovations on our office weren't yet complete then. So after I fulfilled my mission and returned to the cottage, I found Orsted waiting for me. This is something that he did on occasion. The cottage only had one room at this point, so there was nowhere else for him to go, really. And getting new orders and reporting on previous work was kind of a combo deal. So when he finished his own work, he would often wait around the cottage until it was time to move on to the next step. Anyways, that day I intended to start my report, as usual, when he suddenly said,
"Isn't it about time?"
Those were the first words out of his mouth. I knew what he meant. It was obvious enough. I had been anxious the entire job, wondering when it would happen. I never dreamed, of course, that Orsted would bring it up. But like anyone else, I'm only human.
"You can report to me later,"
he told me. I agreed quickly and left the cottage, charging through the drifts like a snowplow as I hurried home. I came home to find Roxy, ready to go in labor at any time. If I returned home even 2 days later, I would have missed the birth altogether. "Oh, Rudy, are you sure I'll be able to do this? Will I be able to deliver this baby?" she asked me. Poor thing. She was at her wit's end by the time I made it back. Her face was white as a sheet. As she repeated the words, "Will this be okay? Maybe I can't actually do this." She never let go of my hand. It made me wonder if Zenith, Mom I mean, had reacted the same way when she gave birth to me. At the time, all I could think of was, Roxy sure was a worrywart. I do have to admit, I'm kind of bummed this is a summary thing. Unfortunately for me, Roxy's worries were not misplaced. The birth wasn't an easy one. The baby's shoulders got stuck in the birth canal. What they call shoulder dystocia, I guess. No idea what the cause was. Maybe it was because Roxy was so petite. As a Midgard woman, she was more than old enough to bear children. But having a half-human child meant that it was larger than a normal Midgard baby. For her, it was probably similar to someone giving birth at a young age. Regardless, it was a high likelihood that my genes were the culprit here. Fortunately, it didn't lead to any danger for the mother or the baby. Lilia's hands were well practiced by this point, and Aisha was ever a genius. They had the added help of a doctor and a midwife, thanks to me rushing out and snow plowing to a clinic and back. It's like, I made a path, come. I melted the path, come, hurry. Our party setup was not lacking for this adventure for sure. Aisha had some experience helping Lucy's birth, so she was extremely calm throughout the affair. Yeah, I think back then the only person that was passing out was Roxy. She wasn't doing good. She was the only one not doing good in that situation. So she was extremely calm throughout the affair. It went relatively smoothly, and no one was making any mistakes or anything else going wrong. Thus, Roxy was able to give birth without a C-section, and both she and the baby made it out alive. Yay, even though it's a summary, Roxy made it through. The new baby was another girl, a bit bigger than Lucy had been as a baby. I wouldn't call her chunky, but she did have a brazen look on her face. Wonder who she could have gotten that from. Her eyes look just like Roxy's, but her mouth is more like Rudy, Sylphie said. her impertinent face was probably a mixture of ours. Well, it would be where if it wasn't, considering she was our child. We agreed on Lara if it was a girl, right? And so my daughter's name was Lara Grey Rat. I don't know, I'm mixed between saying Lara or Lara. I'm probably going to say Lara. It's a Japanese thing. The L's, Lara, Lara. It's like I always say Edis, and everybody gets angry. Sorry. It just happens. I didn't notice until a little after she was born, but she has Roxy's hair color. A beautiful blue, one of the characteristics of the Miggards, you might even say. Roxy and Sylphie had complicated feelings on the matter. At first, I didn't understand what bothered them so much about it. I thought Roxy's hair was beautiful. Plus, Lotta was a girl. I had no doubts that she would grow up to be adorable too. However, Sylphie reminded me that having unique hair color would give kids plenty of ammunition to bully her. There was plenty of non-human races that were living in Shariah, but the majority of the population was still human. Naturally, the less human you look, the more likely they would pick on you for it. Would Lotta's hair that she inherited from Roxy be a curse? Would she be bullied for it? It was too soon to know, but as her father, I intend to keep an eye on it. Yeah, that's a bummer. That is always kind of a bummer aspect, and they were technically talking about that back when Sylphie's child was born. When Lucy was born, that was a big relief. Oh my gosh, it's white. Which that is one of those oddities there. It's like, yes, the alternative was green. let's be honest. The alternative was green. The sigh of relief was Lucy's hair was not green. It was white. So yes, technically coming out white is fine, but it's still even with that case, both Lotta and Lucy both have unique hair. They're both going to deal with the same situation. I mean, they may view white hair as being not as bad. It might be more common amongst humans, maybe. Who knows? This is a bit of a digression. But Ellen Lace also gave birth around the same time as Roxy. Yay, Cliff got his first kid. Ellen Lace and Cliff. Well, it was I'm saying Cliff specifically, but I think it's Ellen Lace's first child. This is literally her first child in all honesty. Given her experience, she had no trouble popping a baby out. One day, Cliff was telling me how she'd go into labor any day now. The next time I saw her, she was cradling a baby in her arms, and she was back to her usual slender form. I guess that's what's happened when you're a childbirthing veteran. She'd probably been through 100 births by now. I don't know if they've ever indicated exactly what it is. She did technically say that she would go around, every time she had a kid, she'd raise it to a certain point and then leave it. But it's like, they never really specified how many. At any rate, the Grimoire's first child was born. They named it Clive. Didn't Rudius make comments about that? As I looked at him, Ellen Lace excitedly gushed, I gave birth to an heir. An heir, huh? Personally, I don't think the heir of a family needs to be a boy. If either Lucy or Lotta expressed the interest in continuing my job helping Orsted, I wouldn't try to stop them. His curse didn't seem to work on them anyways. There's where he kind of indicates the fact that Lotta either. Now, it could be that because he brought Lucy there and it didn't work on her, he's assuming it won't work on Lotta either. Which, again, I don't see him, if she's just born, a newborn baby, all right, let's go. We're going to go walking over the cottage. I don't see that happening unless he had Orsted come nearby or something like that to test it. But yeah, I don't think he would be walking around with her. Alas, Ellen Lace's words managed to provoke one person, Edis. She'd been working with me at that point. A temp employee working collaboratively with Orsted's company, I guess you could say. That was what I was talking about last volume. I'm wondering if that could actually be a thing. And sure enough, here it is. She's working at his side. Now, my whole point was that I wonder if he would ever have Edis go handle this thing while Rudius handles this thing. She stayed at my side, take the vanguard in battle, and mow down anyone that stood in their way. However, upon hearing what Ellen Lace said, she began having her way with him more often, even in the middle of the work, as if to say, it's my turn next. We were going at it often enough that getting pregnant shouldn't have been a problem for her. In fact, given how active their sex life was, it'd be weirder if she didn't fall pregnant. Each time she'd push him to the ground, and like a helpless maiden, okay, yeah, I'll spare you the gory details. He's like, yeah, you don't care about that, do you, Dad? Anyways, whether through bad luck or something else, Edis wasn't having any luck getting pregnant. Naturally, that made her anxious. I noticed her consulting Sylphie night after night when we were back at home. She apparently didn't want me to know how concerned she was, because she kept the intricate details from me. Though I did hear her say one thing that terrified me. I wonder if we should be going at it more often. He's like, no. Edis was already training me for all its worth anymore, and she'd shrivel me up like a prune. Nonetheless, it was the husband's duty to soothe his wife's concern. So I gave it everything I had. I started using a calendar method, keeping track of our menstrual cycles, being more careful about what I ate, and keeping training to a minimum. I tried all sorts of things. Okay, leaving aside my excuse that I was trying to allay her worries, I'd be a liar to say that I wasn't turned on about the whole thing. I'd heard at some point that Zenith had been concerned, because she wasn't able to get pregnant either. I wondered if he'd try to do things like this to assure her. I do remember the two of you going at it every night like animals. That was how Norn was conceived, after all. I like that. A reminder, this is a letter to Paul. Yeah, I heard, Dad. You weren't trying to keep it a secret, Dad. Speaking of which, Norn is in good spirits and still attending school. Enough about her, though. It's like, what the hell, dude? Yeah, by the way, Norn, your daughter? Yeah, not about her. I don't care. We're talking about this. Thanks to my efforts, Edis finally managed to get pregnant. Yay, again, sad to see this in a summary. There's times where I think that Refugien just doesn't care about Roxy or Edis. It's like, that stuff is just such a side story. Edis is, she's a side character. We'll just say that she got pregnant here. It happened approximately 1 month after I made her cut back on her training. Apparently, the source of her struggle was her intense training she had been doing every day. Jumping, hopping, punching, kicking, you name it. She was doing it. Babies are normally pretty resilient, enough that a person can get pregnant even if they're working out. But in Edis's case, the frequency and the intensity of her exercise was twice or more than what any normal human would do. I would probably say it's like hundreds of times. I would assume it would be hundreds of times. It was quite likely that fertilization was taking place, but the embryos couldn't implant because of the rigorous activity. That brought an end to her temporary employment. She could no longer accompany me to work, but she seemed pretty satisfied nonetheless, grinning proudly and snickering and rubbing her swollen belly. As someone who'd known her since childhood, it filled me with emotion to see her like this. She had grown into such an awe-inspiring woman. Philip and Saros, rest their souls, must be weeping for joy in their graves. That is so true. That is so freaking true. I bet, yeah, and Hilda too. Hilda especially. Let me correct that. Hilda especially. But yeah, I can see Philip and Saros being super overjoyed by the idea of this girl, again, that they all gave up on. They were going to give up on her. She's never going to find a boy out there in this noble environment. Just send her off to be an adventurer. Just treat her swordsmanship and send her off. And then here she's going to be a mother. She's going to be a mother. That's great. Again, it shouldn't be a summary. Oh, there's so much they could have done with all that stuff. Incidentally, confirmation of her pregnancy only happened about a month prior to me penning these words to you. Right now, Edis was in her 4th month of her pregnancy. She'd been pretty well behaved lately, perhaps in part because of the morning sickness. By the time I finish my next job and get back home, I guess she'll be in her 5th month. Part of me worries that she'll return to her intense workouts once she got used to the pregnancy. I sent a letter to Ghislaine asking for advice, since she's the only person who knows Edis for as long as I have. I figured she might know how to convince Edis to cool it until her pregnancy was over. Ghislaine must be having it rough too, namely because the king, who'd been long bedridden with illness, finally passed away. Ariel would soon be taking the throne. First Prince Gravel seemed to be putting on one final struggle, but he was hardly a formidable foe at this point. There was no chance that Ariel would lose this fight. As she informed me, Ariel will probably be spending the next 2 or 3 years fighting to secure her seat, so Ghislaine would have plenty to do as her bodyguard in the meantime. If for any reason we head out towards Ostra Kingdom after Edis gives birth, I like to pay them all a visit. While we're discussing Edis, it seemed like she'd given thought to what they'll name their baby if it was a boy. For that reason, I decided to come up with a girl's name on my own. I didn't care what the gender of the child would be. I'll be happy if she gives birth as a healthy baby. That's all I care about, the safety of the mother and the child. Yeah, he's like, she's just thinking of a boy's name because she's convinced it's going to be a boy. I better think of a name for if it's a girl. Let me cover that base for her because she's not going to do that. Honestly, between work, training, and hanging around the house, my days are pretty fulfilling. Granted, I don't have a lot of time to spend with my kids, but otherwise, things are good. Finally, I like to talk about Zenith's mental state. There's still no sign of her regaining her memories. She was making progress with her emotions, but that progress stalled at some point. She basically can't speak whatsoever. I tried brainstorming with Orsted for solutions, but he doesn't seem to know how to help her either. And if it's a mystery to him of all people, maybe that means there isn't a way to help her at all. Literally the person that knows all abilities, not knowing how to help her. Now, he did mention the idea of using like some really high healing spell, something that would fix her. But I think if I remember correctly, it was Orsted. If I remember correctly, he was saying specifically, if you do that right now, you have no idea what it might do. Forcing it to correct could cause problems. Again, the mind is such an unknown. It is such an unknown. That said, he did tell me that in all the loops he had been through, this is the first time he had seen her become disabled like this. So perhaps there's some solution out there he simply isn't aware of. Some magic item that can cure her. I prefer not to give up and keep looking for a cure, but I think my only choice is to prepare to be in it for the long haul. This is the sucky part. There's two routes. And sadly with things with the mind in a lot of cases, like especially like dementia and Alzheimer's, anything that causes a decay in the mind, there's never a fix. There's not a medicine that makes the tissue come back together. Now with like multiple sclerosis, you can like have a scarring and you can kind of work around it. You know, you basically retrain yourself. So If you have an episode and it messes up with your mobility, like you can't move your hand anymore, you can, in some cases, you can keep moving. If it's not too widespread of a scar, I've had experience with teaching somebody how to move it, how to learn how to move it again. It's like it's not moving. It's like it's gone. But you're making it active. You keep moving it, and it triggers in the mind, oh, that's how that works. That's how I can move these muscles. That's how I can move these tendons. And that's how you can kind of retrain somebody. I've literally helped somebody learn how to walk again. Like they were vegetable. Couldn't move anymore. Teaching them how to relearn how to move. It's literally like teaching a child how to walk. So it can happen. But there's nothing that hurts more when you're trying to help somebody through the process of recovering something like that. Something in the mind. And you get to that stage where, gosh, we got them on their feet. We got them moving around again. Their coordination's working again. They're walking around normally again. And you're getting excited. Like, I'm getting them back. They're getting better again. They're going to get back on their feet. They're going to get their life back. And then it plateaus. Suddenly, it just doesn't. They're getting so much better, and then it sucks when you get to that point where it's almost like, what's worse? They never were able to move, or you're seeing progress and you're getting excited like they're going to get their life back. They're going to go back and out and get into the world. Rebuild their lives. Get a job again. Build back their career. Seek out a new career. Go after hopes and dreams in the future. And plateau. That's what he's experiencing. That's the worst thing possible. It's a sentence, but I read so much more into it because of that experience. Nothing worse than they get that point where it just stops. She was making progress with her emotions, but that progress stalled at some point. Sucks. But yeah, I do feel for him in the idea of like, but I think my only choice is prepare to be in it for the long haul. At some point, you can with that whole plateauing, there's at some point where you're like, it's not getting better. This is it. This is what we're going to be dealing with for the future. This is the new them. That's the sucky thing to think of. It's not like regaining things. This is different, obviously, because it's a fantasy world, and what is plaguing her, we don't know. But in the case of like a lot of this other stuff, it's like in a lot of cases, they don't get their old self back. It's like they become a new person, and that's what sucks more than anything. When somebody that you've known for your entire life suddenly is somebody different now. It's hard. It's something that eventually you have to come to grips with. Even now, and I've been dealing with it for years. I can't. I still haven't come to grips with it. Father, remember how you scolded me back when we were in the holy country of Jobless? You were upset that I was preoccupying myself with another woman and leaving Mother to fend for herself. I don't mean for that to be the case this time, but I hope you'll forgive me for not prioritizing her recovery more. I'd like to continue doing my best I can. Respectfully, your son. With a thud, Rudius shut his diary. He had written it like a letter, one that he'd never send to anyone. There was days where writing like this hardened his resolve, and that resolve meant plenty of motivation to getting himself moving. All right. Guess it's time to go. Eager to greet the day, he stood up and started towards the magic circle. Thus began another day of work. And that is chapter 0, I guess. I do hate that later part of this, where he's literally saying, Dad, you got mad at me when I was at Holy Country Minimalist. You said that I was preoccupying myself. That was when he said, what, Sylphie too? And he's like, what the hell, Sylphie? What about your family? What about your mom? What about Aisha? What about Lilia? What the hell, boy? What about your family? And again, that was triggered because he never seen Rudius seeing them as family. He looked at me like an insect. I wasn't his father for some reason. He was too worried about this girl. He was too worried about his girlfriend. That's all he cared about. He didn't see us as family. He didn't see Zenith as his mom. He never looked at her like his mom. And so that was the frustration there. And yeah, he's technically right here going, yeah, you got on to me about that before. And here I'm prioritizing my family. I'm prioritizing Sylphie, Roxy, Edis, Lucy, Lara. That's who I'm prioritizing. Protecting them with Orsted. I'm not trying to get Zenith better. Sorry, I'm doing that again. But I think at this point, Paul back there, he made a mistake. He admits he made a mistake back there. He was putting way too much on Rudius. And again, a lot of that was driven because he never seen Rudius seeing them as family. And that was it felt like a confirmation when he said that, probably. I think Paul, looking at him now, would see that differently. No, you're protecting your family. It's fine. It should be fine. Take your time. But I think he would be I think there'll be a side of him that he'd want him to help Zenith. That's for sure. But yeah, it does suck that he immediately thinks of that. Moving on, Chapter 1, One Job Among Many. Angelic Currentel, or Angie for short. I was debating whether I was going to go with Angie or Angie, and I think because it's angelic, I want to put Angie. So I'm going to put Angie. I might say Angie. I just got that Ange thing going on with Japanese shows. Was born on the western edge of the King Dragon Realm, in a village bordering a dense forest. Since her parents were apothecaries, they naturally educated her in that field as they raised her. Her parents were both killed by a monster. It was a story not unusual for her village. Saddened by the loss, she held a funeral for them before inheriting their house and following their career path. Angie had one close friend, Pham Handora. Pham was born into a local hunting family, and like Angie, lost her parents early. Her mother died from an illness before reaching adulthood, and her father was killed by a monster. Or rather, her father was actually an escort for Angie's parents when they were hunting herbs. In the process of being unable to protect his charges, he also died himself. For this, Pham felt guilty about what happened, and Angie in turn resented Pham. The two fortunately made peace after a number of quarrels. Presently, the whole village knew how close-knit the two were. This year, both girls will be 21. Tisk tisk, aren't there any decent guys out there? Pham muttered as she wore a fur vest and snug leather leggings. Her boots were made of thick fur, and a mountain knife hung on her hip. A quiver and bow was thrown over her shoulder. Despite being covered in dirt, that didn't distract from her attractive facial features. Well, there aren't any around here. Being an apothecary, Angie wore pants that were easy to move in and a tan leather top. She was equipped with a hatchet and an enormous basket on her back, carrying herbs and fruits. The two of them were in the forest, with Angie collecting ingredients for medicine. Rich boys are best, gorgeous but ignorant of the world, and no experience in women. All you gotta do is hold their hand, and their cheeks go bright red. I'd rather find with a normal guy. Don't care if he's got money. I just want him to be nice. Ugh, Angie, can't you dream bigger? Maybe you should consider coming back to reality instead, Pham. There weren't many eligible men in the village. Most were already married. There weren't many followers of the Millis amongst them. But, per the village rules, only the chief was allowed to take more than one wife. Cheating. I wonder who made that rule. I wonder who in the village made the rule that only they could have multiple wives. Who makes the rules in the village? You're gonna go by my rules, and my rule says that I'm only one allowed. The current chief was closing in on 50, and already had 5 wives. It wasn't likely that he would take another one at this point. Really, huh? The only guy around here I'd have any chance of marrying is probably Dochi. Bochi? Dochi? Dochel. Dochel was a son of the village chief, and the same age as them. Alas, he was promised someone the moment he was born, and already had married them. He even had a son to act as his heir. There was talk that he'd soon be taking over as chief. Once that happened, he'd no doubt take another wife, as is custom for a new chief. Naturally, the topic of the town would be who would be the second. Their village had far more unmarried women than married men. It's like they need to allow more people to get married. Unless they want the village to die out. Nah, he wouldn't take me as his wife. Well, it is true that you used to bully him. In that case, maybe he'd pick me out of spite. That way he could have his way with me and pay me back during our first night together. No way. He's still terrified of you even now. Being close in age, the two girls often played together as kids. There was 7 other kids similar to their age in this village, and Pham acted as a leader when they were kids. Back then, she'd often pick on Dochel, bringing him to tears. Angie had been part of the group and assumed she'd wind up marrying one of the others. But it didn't work out that way. 3 of that group left the village, leaving only Dochel and 3 girls behind. One of the other girls was his betrothed, leaving only Pham and Angie. But you still have a chance, Angie. You're a cutie. Nah, no way. I wouldn't be able to keep working if I got married. And that would leave everyone in a pinch. Guess so. Well, maybe you'll get lucky, as a reward for your hard work this time around. That would be nice, wouldn't it? In truth, she was actually thinking of something completely different. She couldn't see her Prince Charming arriving. Angie had insisted that her friend come back to reality. But from a young age, she heard a barge tale that inspired her. It was about an adventurer with blue hair that traveled alone from Millis to the central continent and shot to the guild's A rank in no time. Still, although Angie's heart sang when she heard it, she chalked it up as a tale from a distant land, giving it little more thought than that. It wasn't until the events of a decade prior that she stopped dismissing it so readily. One day, a certain adventurer wandered into their village. The person in question had left the dense forest on their way to the Westport, and was making a brief stop in the village on the way, or so they said. As fate had it, she was short and had blue hair. I for a minute thought it was going to be reserved coming out of a forest, because I think it was a different area. I think initially he was supposedly going that area, around that area at some point, but again, he kind of ended up going north, or he went down south and he got to Paul and then brought the kids back up north. So he could have gone through there, but it wouldn't fit to the story of the tale of the blue-haired girl, unless he told her about Roxy, I guess, because he did meet Roxy briefly. As fate had it, she was short and had blue hair. She also had a witch's hat, white robes, a long staff, and a square rucksack. She was exactly as the bards described her, making her fantastical tale reality before Angie's eyes. The girl stayed one night. She regaled the 10-year-old Angie and the other villagers with accounts of her journeys. Fam and the others lit up when they heard her stories of taking down a boss in a labyrinth. But what made Angie's heart soar was the girl's reasoning for entering the labyrinth. She claimed she explored them in hopes of finding a dashing male partner. Alas, she had conquered said labyrinth without fulfilling that goal. Still, memories of that tale left a lasting impact on Angie. The adventure's tale inspired a deep yearning in her, a yearning that someday dragged her into the ocean of a fantasy. She had imagined herself cornered by a monster to be saved by a dashing prince. We all know where this is. Like, by the time I got to this point in the story, I'm like, yeah, I know where this is going. I know where this is going. This is Rias' job. I know, we all know what's going to happen. It's like, this is way too obvious. A little bit too obvious. She giggled inwardly about how she would offer her own body as a reward. Still, she knew it wasn't realistic. Dreams were just that, dreams. Delusions didn't magically become reality. While she yearned for it, her eyes were focused on reality for now. Not that she had any other choice. Being an orphan of 5 years ago. Being forced to face facts, whether she liked them or not. I just hate I'm very blessed that I had two very supportive parents. I would hate the idea of being abandoned like that. Angie, be careful. We're entering you-know-whose territory. Yeah, I know. The two of them made their way to a cave, deep in the forest. They were looking for ingredients to make a special tonic for a common illness in this region, Ibri syndrome. We've got to say Dochi. Yeah, we do. Dochel had come down with it recently. It would cause high fevers, rash across the body, and death within 10 days. It wasn't transmittable, so people of the city didn't consider it dangerous, though the same couldn't be said for the people of the village. For them, it was a terrifying sickness with high mortality rate. The closest capable mage of detoxification magic was more than 10 days away. It was unfortunate that Dochel, their childhood friend and future leader of the village, was target of it. After Fam's mother came down with it, it had led their parents into the forest and to their deaths. That was a nice, interesting way of kind of tying it all together. That was why I was bringing that up so much earlier. Both of them had faithful ties to the disease that now threatened another close to them. That's what drove them to collect the ingredients for the tonic. They moved forward in silence. The ingredient they needed was an ant flower, which grew at the base of the cliff ahead. They emerged from the forest to a vast field of blue ant flowers. That was a weird thing because it said they came to a cave, and then suddenly they're emerging from the forest to a vast field, and there's a cliff in front. The way that this was all described right here, I like reread it like 3 times, and it doesn't make any sense. So I think the whole cave thing shouldn't have been there, I guess. Now my thought was that yes, they could have gone through a cave, and the cave comes to this like opening where it's the top of the cave is open, like it's a round area, and it's got a field in the middle of it. That could be it. But it feels no, because they said that it came out of a forest to come out into here. So maybe they came out through the cave to a forest to an opening in the cave. I don't know. It's explained weird. I think the cave wasn't supposed to be there. Unless they came out of a cave to a forest and then to a field. Yeah, that could make sense. I don't know. Whatever. Anyways, moving on. Doesn't matter. They swallowed hard. Their expression remained rigid despite the sight before them. Angie stretched out a trembling hand towards the flowers, pulling off a single petal. Like a crack of thunder, a deep roar ripped the air. Angie, run! Angie was frozen in place, while Fam pulled an arrow from her quiver. Angie, hurry! An apparition appeared in the meadow atop the cliffs. An enormous lizard, at least 10 meters long, and plume-colored skin. It was the ruler of the forest, the Ibri lizard, a wingless reptile, like ones found in Beggaret continent. The reason why it was called an Ibri lizard was that the Ibri syndrome ran rampant in whatever lands they inhabited. Also, the flowers that created the tonic to treat it was always close in their territory. A scholar theorized that the Ibri lizards spread the syndrome, so that the humans would seek out the herb to become its prey. That is a very interesting thing to add to the ecosystem of this world. This idea that there is creatures that could possibly create a disease, a syndrome to the people around them that essentially needs this certain herb that they kind of reside in to cure it. It sort of is like the possibility that possibly maybe, I mean, getting into actual weird theories on how this could actually work in a theoretical setting and ground it in reality is the concept of, let's say the creature itself creates a pheromone, it excretes something, their number 1 or 2 fertilizes the ground to create this specific type of plant. Maybe that itself, the winds can carry some sort of airborne disease or something like that through the air. It gets into the people themselves, they get the syndrome, and then they have to actively seek out that herb that sort of feeds it or kicks it back or cures it in some cases. Like, it is a very interesting concept. Now, you could put it into the realms of it's just being a creature producing that in order to lure something in, sort of like a siren. Like it's like the mermaid or whatever that calls and sings a song so that the pirates come by and they dock their ships and they kill them. It draws in the prey. It's seemingly like that kind of concept, or even the succubus. The succubus, just not using the whole aspect of, draining them that way. It's a really cool idea, even though it's tragic in the concept of the story. But it does make me curious why they don't. I mean, it does seem like, as it says here, it's been terrorizing them for 5 years. So it does make sense that they haven't found a resolve for this yet. But yeah, my initial thought would be, if it's curable with detoxification magic, get somebody there that's always at the village that can cure it at least. Or yes, pay somebody equally to just go kill the dragon creature lizard thing. Whether it was true or not was yet to be proven. But for these past 5 years, their village had been plagued by both the lizard and the sickness that followed it. Yeah, that kind of connects the idea that it's pretty much close to be proven. Like that's a smoking gun situation there. Where there's smoke, there's fire there. This was the culprit that killed both Angie's parents and Fam's father. And in a sense, her mother, I would argue. Fam let out a howl, trying to pump herself up as she let an arrow fly. It pierced the lizard's scales, but it didn't seem to affect it. It quickly scaled down the cliff like a gecko. Angie, I'm begging you, stand up, run. Angie finally got on her feet, but with panic gripping her and her feet tripping, she pushed herself to scurry away, Fam following behind her. Unfortunately, it was too late. With impressive speed, the lizard closed in, catching up to Fam, its gleaming, jagged teeth clamping down her leg, lifting her up like a rag doll, flinging her through the air. Fam let out a howl as she went crashing into the field of flowers. Angie had seen it all, her eyes meeting Fam as she was sailing through the air. She had a look of sheer terror on her face. Hesitating, Angie had to save her. But before she could do that, the lizard was before her. I'm going to die, she thought. In the past, she dreamed of someone jumping in to save her in such a situation. Nothing more than delusion. The reality was that when someone was in a real crisis, there was no time for anyone to jump in to help. Death arrives in an instant. That was how the world always worked. Unless you flag it for 15 paragraphs that somebody's going to be a Prince Charming and save you, and Rudius is involved for a job. Yeah. Now, it does technically imply that it doesn't play out like it should have. Like, Rudius over here has, like, the scenario that's played out before him, and it doesn't go as planned. Whereas here, yeah, there's the flagging of this dream that technically flags it to happen. Maybe Angie has a strong destiny to find that certain someone. But then something slammed to the lizard's side, sending it flying. Angie couldn't believe her eyes. The thing that was about to kill her, that was too large and heavy to be sent in the air, was now flying off in an odd direction. The creature snarled and had blood spilling from its mouth as it landed. It raised its head, glancing across where it had fallen. Angie followed its gaze to a man standing in a mouse-gray robe, flapping in the wind. Beneath that, he wore black armor and held what appeared to be a tube in his left hand. His light brown hair fluttered as he strode towards the lizard. The lizard then launched itself at the man with such agility, it was hard to believe it was wounded. Angie thought the creature had bit him in half, but in fact, the man had stopped the lizard's head with his right hand, gripping its enormous nose and holding it in place. He lifted his left hand, aiming the strange tube at its head. "Shotgun trigger," shouted the man. Something discharged from the tube at an incredible speed, blowing its entire head off. Despite its enormous size, the sound of it collapsing was strangely quiet. It was hard to believe what Angie was seeing, but bright red blood flowed from the severed neck. The man let out a breath before extending his right hand towards the creature's corpse. Flames swallowed it up in seconds, filling the air with a smell of burnt meat. He then turned to Angie, silhouetted by the flames, as he spoke casually. "Hello there. You're Angelic Kerntel, yes?" "Huh?" she blurted out, dumbfounded. "Or are you Fam Handora?" She knew that he was asking her name, but she couldn't form words in response. She shook her head before bobbing her head in quick succession. "I came here to rescue you." Hearing that, her heart began to beat louder. This stranger introduced himself as Rudius Grey Rat. Yeah, we knew that was coming. Knew that was coming way back there. We're going to play off the Roxy scenario again. No, that was interesting. Some things to note here. Really, really crazy. Now, this is pretty much what seems like... And again, I kind of mentioned earlier, I hope this isn't going to become the norm. Like, we're just going to be doing this for the next, 5 volumes. But it is kind of cool. Like, this is literally Rudius, the Iron Man arc. This is Superman Rudius arc, where he's going to be going around being Superman, saving people. He kind of mentioned that in the whole, diary letter thing, is this idea of, he's going around and saving this person, moving this person from to here, doing these odd things to make sure that people are in the place they need to be. Because, the whole butterfly effect. But yes, it's kind of like this whole thing where he's just kind of teleporting different locations and being Superman and doing crazy stuff and being shocking to people. Becoming some hero that just... Yeah, he's technically giving his name so people know who he is, but he's going to essentially become a worldwide hero. Oh, Rudius? Yeah, he showed up one time and saved this one person of our village. But yeah, that armor, this big massive lizard thing, being able to stop it with one hand, not even being moved, just stops it. kind of shows that aspect of, yes, it being the armor itself, which is supposed to, by all accounts, based on the previous discussion, is sort of like a downgraded version, a smaller version of the previous one, which he mentioned the idea of making it smaller and take less mana, be more mana efficient, thus it doesn't drain him dry just for using it. So that's the assumed thing here. And again, it's playing into what he was doing with that armor before. It's creating him a battle aura. So he's able to stop something. It's giving him incredible strength to stop something. So that's really cool. But yeah, additionally, also, he technically, like the turret thing that he created, this Gatling gun that he created before for Orsted, now he's got a shotgun. He's got this tube, he's just shooting things. I wonder if it's because she doesn't know what a shotgun is, presumably. So I guess the assumption here is that it's like something that could possibly be that he maybe made a shotgun. He just doesn't know what a shotgun looks like, or that it is a shotgun. So she's just seeing a tube, and something discharges from it. He's calling it a shotgun trigger, so I'm assuming he created what looks like probably a shotgun, which is kind of cool. So yeah, we got Rudia's superhero arc going around with a gray robe, black armor, and a shotgun, just knocking out things. He's walking around looking like a character from Bloodborne or something like that. He needs like a big old massive cleaver or something like that. While Angie battered with her thundering pulse, Rudius walked over to Pham and began to heal her. It was almost instantaneous. While not regaining consciousness, her nearly severed leg was restored. Rudius explained that someone asked him to come to their rescue, but wouldn't say who. For her part, Angie had no clue who could have possibly put him up to this. Regardless, I'm simply glad that I made it in time. That was a close call. Yes. Rudius carried Pham on his back as they walked through the forest. Angie, now carrying a basket full of ant flowers, was incessantly soothing her hair. She knew her hair was a rat's nest, and she was covered in dirt. She was in a panic of what to do, but knew her attitude was the biggest problem. She's like, I mean, girl, you're not doing as bad as Roxy was doing when he ran into her, so he doesn't care. If he was fine with Roxy, and he was okay with it, he wouldn't mind you. But he's not okay with it. Each time Rudius glanced over his shoulder at her, her cheeks lit up, and she had to avert her eyes as she followed behind him. Fortunately, he didn't seem to pay her strange behavior mind. He actually kept his eyes focused ahead most of the time, almost as if he thought it was wrong to look upon her face. He did not break the silence as they walked. Occasionally, he would glance back, just to confirm that she was behind him. Angie wished that she could get a better look at his face. Knowing they were closing in on the village, she knew that he'd be declared a hero who saved the village. There would be no way that she'd get a word in on him after that. Finally, her eyes landed on Pham, still slumped over on his back, her breast pressed against the back of him. Angie couldn't help but feel a bit jealous. Yeah, it seems to imply later on that the reason why he keeps looking forward, I mean, he's looking back to make sure that she's there. He could also be getting a peek, but yeah, he's avoiding her because probably she's just like, there's something showing, and she's not realizing it this entire time. I mean, it could have been ripped as they were walking to the forest, but I'm sure that he was clearing the way. Mr. Rudius, she blurted out. Yes, what is it? He glanced back at her, his expression blank. Pham, I mean, isn't Pham heavy? No, not at all. But, we've been walking this whole time. You have to be exhausted, right? No, I've trained my body enough that I'm not worn out by something like this. As he spoke, he rolled up his sleeve and flexed. It was impossible to see under his black armor, but she was impressed nonetheless. She's like creating this own image of what she's seeing. Ah, I get it. My apologies for not realizing sooner. Sorry? She stared blankly at him. He smiled with his pearly teeth glimmering, though that was a hallucination on her part. Miss Angelic, you must be tired. Shall we take a small break? Oh yes, right. I'm exhausted, sorry, but please let me rest a bit. Also, feel free to call me, please call me Angie. I don't mind. All right, Miss Angie. In that case, how about right here? Rudius lowered Pham onto the ground and placed her against a tree before sitting nearby. Angie took the opportunity to sit right next to him. His shoulders seemed to jump. She wondered if that upset him, glancing at his face, which looked uncomfortable. He wasn't disgusted, more confused. Sorry, I was just scared, you see. I still am. So you don't mind if I sit next to you? Huh? Yeah, sure, be my guest. Things were proceeding smoothly, and Angie intended to ride that wave. Thank you so much for what you did. Not at all, it's part of my job. Reese responded curtly, looking down at her, but his eyes kept darting back and forth. Following his gaze, she noticed that her clothes had ripped at some point, leaving her chest exposed. Gasping and trying to hide herself, keeping her hands across her chest. She intended to see this dream through to its steamy conclusion, however far off it might be, which was precisely why she slided closer to Rudius. He'd retreat, and then she'd pursue, backing him to the edge of the stump and pressing herself against his arm. Girl going on the attack. Mr. Rudius. Yes, what is it? His eyes kept wandering to her chest, prompting her to swallow hard. She wasn't as well endowed as Pham, but larger than most of the girls in the village. Pervy old men often harassed her with comments like, "Did you boil some medicine in that valley between those nice big mounds you got?" In the village, they were objects that people teased her about. But now, something inside her screamed that this was a time to employ them as weapons. Perhaps this is just a job for you, as you say, but that doesn't change how grateful I am that you saved my life. Well, you're welcome. That is, assuming you don't intend to return home right away once you get back to the village, then please, stop by my house. I'd love to find a way to repay you. No, I must return promptly. I have another job lined up. That took the wind out of her sails, but not enough to give up. She was in this for the long haul. She wanted to continue this adventure to its conclusion. She got nothing to lose. Then, well, in that case, please, let me show you my appreciation now. I don't have anything to offer, so I'm afraid all I can give you is my body. Her face turned red as her hands traveled up to her torn shirt, ready to pull it all away. Maria's gaze was firmly glued at her chest as she started to expose herself, but he abruptly stood up. Mr. Rudius? My apologies, but I have a chronic disease that is threatening to flare up, so I need to take some medicine. Even still, he didn't peel his eyes away from her chest. But him speaking of medicine brought her back to her senses. Hearing that he suffered from a chronic illness made her want to help. She was an apothecary after all. If it's medicine you need, I'm an apothecary. As soon as we return to my house, I can brew you something. No, I brought my own with me. Reaching into his pocket, he brought out a bundle of white cloth. Angie watched, curious what kind of medicine it could be, likely due to her obsession of her work. Reese was an incredibly strong warrior. He had armor and sported muscles to stop a lizard in its tracks. He used offensive magic. He was clearly a high-ranking mage warrior. Plus, he used some really high-level healing magic on Fam. What kind of chronic illness could be plaguing a living legend like him? And what kind of medicine would he use to combat it? Is it a tonic? Yes, well, something like that. He spread the fabric out, but to her surprise, there was nothing. No pill or powder. So where was the medicine? She didn't wonder long. Looking at it, she was puzzled by the sight of girls' underwear. Knew it was coming. Knew it was coming. There's just a point that you know Rudius too well. Sadly. Rudius was suddenly holding Pantsu in his hands. By the size, ones that looked clearly like they belonged to a young girl. What? Where? Why is he holding those? It was strange. Moments ago, he'd been holding a cloth containing medicine. No, this is the cloth that he'd been holding. The underwear was simply folded up. But why? She could only stare, perplexed. What? Phew. Ignoring her confusion, Rudius let out a big exhale before burying his head in the Pantsu and inhaling deeply. In and out. He breathed. He smothered his face in the fabric, nostrils flaring as he drew in the scent. He even licked it periodically, thoroughly enjoying the soft bundle in his hands. Angie trembled, shaken by what she was witnessing. A chill ran down her spine, but she could neither speak or move. She sat frozen, just watching him. In and out, he breathed, smothering his face for a whole 5 minutes. Thank you, God. As he finished, he placed his hands together in prayer before neatly folding and placing it in his pocket. Unsure of what to say, Angie sat, opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water, her mind struggling to process what was going on. The mood had been perfect. Then out of nowhere, he began sniffing Pantsu like a pervert. Underwear is best after it's been worn. Yes, indeed, he muttered to himself. All she knew for certain was that he killed whatever emotions came over her. Budding romance was dead. Well then, Miss Angie, what were you saying? After a pause, she replied, No, it's nothing. Her dream had ended. Angie promptly returned home after that. When they arrived at the village, Rudius entrusted Fam to her. I have no intention of staying at your village at all, so I'll excuse myself here. Yes, all right, thank you. Yeah. Angie jerkily bobbed her head up and down, devoid of emotion. Alas, the irregular events of a few moments ago had been burned into her mind. Well then, take care. As he went to leave, he remembered something. Oh, that reminds me, Miss Angie, you said that you'd return a favor, yes? A chill ran down her spine. He did save her. If he wanted her body, she couldn't very well refuse him. It didn't matter how disgusted she felt. She wasn't such an ingrate to say no. Well, I'm afraid I really can't give you my underwear. No, I don't need your underwear. There's something I want you to do for me. Something you want me to do? She knew that he would ask her to do something totally debauched. The color drained from her face as she prepared herself. Seeing her reaction, Rudius scratched the back of his head. Guess it's only natural that she'd be disgusted. Rudius muttered as he slipped something out of his backpack. He held out a picture book and a figurine. Miss Angie, if you happen to have a child someday, I'd like you to read this picture book to them. Tell them that the Superb tribe aren't a bunch of devils. Huh? Superb what? What are you talking about? The Superb tribe. The Superb tribe. She was thrown off by the request, her eyes wide as saucers. There's a glossary at the end of the book to help with learning how to read the letters, so you can use that part of your child's education too. I do hope that you'll share this with them. He departed, leaving Angie dumbfounded, a picture book and a figurine with green hair in her hands. Just looking at the likeliness of the Superb tribe was terrifying. The figure itself was eerily intricate, and the colors made it look realistic. She wondered if it would suddenly spring to life. It was a perfect replica of a terrifying demon. She felt the urge to dispose of it, but remembered that Rudius saved her life. The Superb tribe, huh? She never met one, but heard of them. They were a group of people often referred to as devils. When she was young, her parents warned her that if she did anything bad, the Superbs would come and carry her off to devour her. And yet, Rudius was trying to spread the story that they weren't awful after all. Why do such a thing? Unable to decipher his motivations, she wasn't quite sure what to do. Pressing her finger against the figurine's head, the hair popped off, leaving a bald head behind. She began to burst into laughter. She still had no idea what to make of this, but her savior had made a request of her that she planned to honor. Several years after that, Ch0-1, who Angie cured with the tonic and is now the leader of the village, took her as his second wife. He was a hard worker, but rather boring man. The only upside was that he wasn't a pervert. Angie was grateful for that at least. When her child was born, she did as she was told and read the picture book to them. Eventually, the picture book's story became widespread throughout the village. The nearby region would come to recognize the Superb tribe as a clan of bald warriors of justice. That, however, is a story for another time. I always hate these stories where at some point it kind of jumps forward and then it goes, yeah, we're not talking about that now. Because you know, it's like, this is like a several year span right here. So it's obviously going to be possibly, you know, like several volumes in the future this whole thing would come up. That's like the whole situation with the Forest Goddess Lane chapter, where it's like literally talking about how this whole war happened, they won, and then jump forward in time, people are like, you know, worshiping this Goddess Lane, and you would have to expect that's probably way forward in time. So, and I think technically they implied something with the Death God chapter, that he would join him for this war and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, when is that happening? It all kind of, at some point, is going to tie together. And I'm curious if it'll loop back in the story. Like, at some point, yeah, Rajur talks about how he went to this area in the King Dragon realm, and everybody was like, holy crap, it's Rajur, this warrior of justice. It'll be cool. It'll be cool if that all kind of ties back together at some point. Or maybe somebody meets, you know, Ch0-1 or somebody of this village later on, Fam, maybe, at some point. I mean, it's implying that the whole reason that he was there was Fam, at least in the next chapter. Sorry, spoiler. We're not getting into with this recording because I think I spent way more time in the 0 chapter than I thought I would. But yeah, that's chapter 1. But yeah, that was very, very. It's so Rudius, the pervert Rudius and his whole movement here. But yeah, very surprising that here's our big reveal that the figurine thing's done. Like they're literally making the books, they're making the figurines. It seems like they purposely went out of their way to make the reserved figurine have the green hair, but it's removable, which is kind of interesting. And it's more interesting that he decided to have the green hair on it. My assumption is that the book itself tells the story of Rajur and how maybe they could have gone through the whole thing of him being betrayed and forced to do that and it causing everybody to be terrified of them, and then getting into the story of him actually helping fight Laplace, because that was the key thing there. He helped Petagoose. And that was the key thing that Rudius wanted to do. He wanted to tell the story that he helped Petagoose defeat them. And so that would be a really crucial part of redeeming his tribe, is telling that true story there. But yes, also the fact that he was betrayed there. That he was betrayed, that's why he went to kill Laplace. He helped them, the great heroes, to kill Laplace. That is the story that I think he wanted to tell. So yeah, you can have the figurine. Here is the figurine. It's Rajur. He has the green hair, just like the beginning of the story. But when you read the rest of the story, oh, that's why this pops up. It's no longer his curse. He's removed the curse, because they could technically put that in there. That towards the later part of the book, his curse is waning, and so he removes the hair in order to remove the curse. Like it's proof that there is a curse upon them. That would be interesting. So I kind of got that sense when she popped it off, which it kind of also diffuses the situation. She's seeing how terrifying it is. And the moment, that's the key thing, the moment the hair pops off, she laughs. So that fear, she's looking at this demon. This thing it's so intricate. It's so well designed that looking at it's terrifying. She's never seen a Superb before. It's only because he said it's a Superb that she knows it's a Superb. But the moment that the hair pops off, it's signification of back here when Rudius was with Rajur, and he was talking about how he shaved his hair, and that's helping out, because that's what the man god told him. If the man god was telling him the truth, let's be honest, that because he shaved his head, that's taken a lot of it away, and that curse is waning. And so that's the signification there. The moment that the hair comes off, that green hair that signifies demons, the moment that comes off, she laughs. She bursts in laughter. Like, why would you laugh? Like, oh, the hair came off. He looks like a baldy now. Yeah, that could be it. But it's probably more the idea that signification of that fear gets taken away. It's symbolisms. And I know that's me. I often criticize people for over symbolizing things, but that it feels like that's kind of on purpose there. So very interesting. But yeah, it's very interesting that, yes, finally we're revealing that he is now passing these out, which would make sense if he's going around doing all these little odd jobs here and there, helping people. It would be great to have those with him to go, oh, here you go. Here, I helped you out. It's like he's doing the jobs for Orsted, but at the same time, he's also fulfilling this other thing that he wanted to do for Rejerd. He's literally going back to what he was doing when they were traveling together. Because that was what Rudeus was doing when he was traveling with Rejerd. He was trying to help the image of him by doing this whole thing with Dead End. And then at the end of each job, he would hand them this figurine and go, here you go. Rejerd's actually a good person. This is a Superd. Superds are actually good people. He was trying to spread this knowledge that he's an actually good person. So now he's able to do it again. Worldwide, he's going around saving people, and he's fulfilling this request that, not request, but this promise that he made with his best friend. This guy that means so much to him in this world. I want to fulfill this. So it's cool that that's finally happening and it's being revealed. If they're selling them, that's the question mark. I would assume that he's selling them. But I'm curious. There's like two things about... It's so funny. There's actually two things about this that's going to probably blow up in Rudeus' face. Not that I don't want him to do this, because it's a really good thing that he's trying to help out Rejerd still at this point. Like, I can totally see Rejerd going to some area at some point. Because if Rudeus is going all over the world, at some point, Rejerd's going to run into a place that he's been to. And it's going to be such a touching thing that... And I think that's probably going to be a chapter, because that's going to be a really good chapter if so. Well, I'm predicting there's going to be a chapter where it's going to open up and it's Rejerd's perspective, and he goes to, say, some random location in, I don't know, let's say maybe he gets back to the Demon Continent. And he goes to some town, and suddenly this kid's running around with his Rejerd figurine, and he's like, that kind of looks like I wonder if Rudeus made that. It looks like the one that he was making for me. And then everybody's like, holy crap, it's the Warrior of Justice, and everybody starts celebrating that he's there. It's going to be so freaking good. It's going to be hard not to cry. It's going to be real hard not to cry because that'll be like that'll probably, my gosh, I can't imagine how overjoyed he'd be with that kind of a situation happening. Not only is this idea of almost fixing this ongoing prejudice against my tribe and this wrongful claim that we were wronged, even though he does admit that he's at fault. Like he accepts that responsibility for what he did. Still, he wanted to fix this. He wanted to reclaim the honor of his tribe. What more? That would be insanely emotional for him to have that happen to him. And I just cannot wait for that to actually happen. But no, like I was getting to, there's two major problems here. The first one is, yes, Rudeus is now selling figurines of devils, basically across the world. Eventually, somebody's going to get mad. That's why he had to get that agreement with Petagoose. That's why he had to get the seal of approval from Ariel, which he's got two really big names. Seal of approval on there. But there's still going to be people that are going to be happy about that, and especially Millis. And so I assume that probably eventually whenever Rudeus gets down to Millis, they're going to be pretty, oh, you're that guy that's spreading those devils, those figurines of those devils, which is still cool. I mean, this is one of those moments of, I kind of mentioned it in one of my videos. It was during the time where the second season, part 1 was coming out, and there was like this whole hubbub and everybody freaking out about how he bought Julie. And I made a whole video basically explaining how people don't realize just how positive the messaging is in Mushoku Tensei. And this is one of those. Literally, this whole idea of him getting rid of forced servitude, specifically, is not a thing yet. It could be, eventually. But at least you see here where he's doing something extremely worldwide impacting. If this gets big, if he spreads these books, which is easily done through a picture book with a fun little figurine, people giving the kids and everything, which I'll get into the other aspect of it in a minute, it's going to spread like wildfire. And eventually he could get rid of discrimination of an entire tribe throughout an entire world. That is huge. That is massive. Rudeus, yes, he's doing it for a different reason. He's doing it for Rejerd, but he's doing it for Rejerd, who is of this race. He's getting rid of the racism around that tribe. That's huge. But yes, the other aspect of this, which I think is going to help it spread more, and I don't know if he's purposely did it that way, because I think originally they were talking about doing a picture book. People can't read. Most people in this world cannot read. So doing a picture book was the best way to do it. Let's just tell the story through pictures. Anybody can see a picture and know what the picture's saying. But he specifically said here, there is a glossary in the back that tells you how to read the letters. There's I guess symbolisms to each character so that you can essentially teach a kid to read with this book. He's giving away free education to the world that doesn't have that education. Hey, parents, read your kid this book. I don't want to read them this book. We have a couple picture books. Okay, maybe we don't have picture books, but why would I read this to them? It's talking about a devil. Well, in the back has all of what you need to teach your kid how to read. It's free education. Who the hell wouldn't want to snag that ASAP? So that helps it spread more. But yes, in a setting like this, the time period with the aspect that there's such a widespread lack of literacy, a lot of cases in time frames, there's a lot of kingdoms and kings and leadership of certain areas that didn't like people knowing how to read. That was a way of controlling. Knowledge and education was a way of controlling people. Now, it's with stranded, villages and whatnot, not that big of a deal, but in a lot of areas near big kingdoms, that could be a problem. So it's kind of two different issues. One is that he's spreading this idol, this devil, and the other aspect is the story that some would find to be, blasphemous and the lies and all that kind of stuff. But additionally, which is fine because again we have the seal of approval from Pedagoose. It's saying that he helped him, but Pedagoose says it's a true story. So that's kind of alleviated there. But again, it's still technically spreading this message of this devil. And again, giving knowledge to the people, which some leaderships won't like. But yeah, anyways, all that said, I just can't at this point wait until that point in which Reserve discovers that Reese has been doing this. And if he's doing a lot of missions in succession like this over and over again, I can see him literally spreading this book around really well. Which, yes, it does have me kind of question, are we going to get to see Julie's Smile Company here soon in the next chapters? I've only barely tipped into the beginning segments of this next chapter. I was actually planning on reading it live if I not live live for you guys, but without editing it beforehand and condensing it. So I know technically a little bit of the next chapter, but I haven't seen, yes, at some point, are we going to get to see Julie's Smile Company? Is Julie over in Asura and they got this big plant set up with a bunch of cute dwarves all making reserved figurines? Who drew it? I don't think they ever brought up an artist or whatever to actually draw the actual picture book, but apparently he found somebody to do that. It's cool stuff. And it's cool to see that. I'm guessing Norm was involved with it. She technically was supposedly writing the original draft of it, so what interesting to see a little bit more in that. This is one of those moments where it kind of bugs me that this is how I find out. I wanted to see that whole process of actually creating the book and the figurine and the process of distribution, all that kind of stuff. That's a lot of fun stuff because it all shows me that dedication, that time it took to get that end goal, which, like I said earlier, is going to be super emotional for me, is when Reserve discovers that this all happened and that he's been doing this for me. So, anyways, I guess that's it. Again, that was a good set of chapters right there. I have my concerns, but it's a good little entry into the volume, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. But that's Mushoku Monday for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday. As always, greatly appreciate you guys for dropping by for the premiere. Hey, chat. Hope you guys are doing well. Hopefully here soon I can start getting back to, 3 or 4 chapters of volume. I can start condensing things a little more than usual. Like I said, technically the chapter 0, I thought that I was gonna read it straight because it was talking to Paul, and I thought I was gonna get a lot more emotional than that. I did have my arguments there. Is that, yeah, I kind of feel that Refugin doesn't really care too much about the second and third wife because it just feels like summary of what happened with them. This insanely pinnacle point of their lives, which is childbirth and pregnancy for Edis. It's a summary, and it's kind of a bummer, but I know sometimes you got to breeze over things. I know that he probably doesn't want to just retrace those steps, but I think with each one of these girls, it's going to be different and more significant with each one of them. Hopefully, Edis's birth doesn't become a summary too. We'll see. She's probably when Edis gives birth, she's literally going to headlock Rudius and probably nearly kill him. They're going to have Orsted on standby to heal Rudius if she nearly kills him again. We'll see how that plays out, but it'll probably be a summary, unfortunately. But anyways, I'm getting back into it. Thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. As per usual, greatly appreciate you guys for your support. Everybody that supports the channel through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, gifted memberships, all that stuff. It helps out, keeps the lights on, and I greatly appreciate it. You guys mean so much to me, and I cannot wait until the next Mushoku Monday, just like everybody else. But until that next Mushoku Monday, y'all take care. Also, hit the like button before you leave. Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to... Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another Trek the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on volume... Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another Trek the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on volume 18, chapter 0. It doesn't really have a chapter when it opens up, but yeah, we'll get into that when we get into that. But yes, what's up, everybody? Thanks by... What's thanks by... Dolchel, whom Angie Kurt... It was a perfect... Underwear is best after it's been boring. Her mind struggling to process that took the sail out of her. Went, did you boil some medicine in them valley between? Did you boil? The reality was that when someone was in krill, making her fantastical fail, but the embryos didn't implant because which must mean that that's far more of a threat to for example, take the dwarven elf.